Hello, Eva Bloom. How are you?
I'm doing so good. Hi, Sam.
Hi. I feel like I have the excited, giggly energy. As soon as you jumped on the Zoom call, I was like, oh, yay! This is gonna be so much fun.
So we're just gonna giggle about queer stuff. Gonna have a great old chat.
Oh my gosh, yes, I'm so excited. But before we jump into our great old chat or gay old chat, uh,
Perfect.
I'm gonna pull a card for us. Um, this is my crystal energy centers deck. I don't use it as much. I thought it would be fun. So yeah, pulling for you, for me, for anyone listening. This is also Pride Month, so that's really exciting. Maybe it'll be an affirmation for that. Oh, it is. It's the crystals rose quartz, and the affirmation is love, and it's for your heart center and for your emotional body. And the synopsis, rose quartz is the heart stone of love, and it heals emotional scars. It can assist with understanding life lessons and gives compassion for others and yourself. So I think that's a perfect card to start our chat. Does love resonate with you today?
Yeah, totally. I also I have like a little altar beside where we're filming, and like rose quartz is like in my little. So yeah,
That is so, it's like my rose quartz and your rose quartz are friends.
yeah, absolutely.
I love it. Well, I am so excited to have you here. And I actually met you through your support club, Fuck Comphet, on Patreon. So I was wondering if we could just start there and if you could tell me, like, what does that mean? Why did you start it? All that good stuff.
Absolutely. The club is called the Comphet Support Club, and Comphet is short for compulsory heterosexuality, which is a term that was created by scholar Adrienne Rich in her 1980 essay all about it. And it just basically says that we are in a society that is founded on the idea that everybody is and should be straight and cisgender. So from the moment we are born, it is assumed that we are gonna, if we are assigned female birth, that we're gonna be women, we're gonna marry men, men are gonna play a big role in our lives. And there's a lot of stuff the workforce in terms of being set up initially to be a woman stays home and cares for the household, and a man goes off and makes money. And we still have a lot of remnants of that structure, which negatively impacts women's lives, and also, yeah, queer people's lives, if that is not the relationship structure that you're in, and many many other different examples of cis heteronormativity and compulsory heterosexuality.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Um, I think you and Marley were the first people I've ever heard use that term, but it really resonates so deeply. Um, so I remember when I knew I wasn't straight and I cried in the bathroom and wanted to be straight so badly. But like who it's just so interesting that we're taught, or that we're as a society we expect people to be straight. Yeah, it's just so interesting once that concept came to me and I started unpeeling it. Why do we even live in a world where people have to come out? Why, it's just, yeah, it's just baffling to know that we also just made all this up. This, people just made that up, but that's not the way our bodies and our souls would operate with the world if we had not made that up. I know that was really chunky, but it's just really interesting to me.
No, totally. Yeah, that at every turn in our life, even as little kids, people still do the thing where it's if there's a boy and a girl toddler, they'll be like hee hee hee. Is that your boyfriend? Is that your girlfriend? And yeah, so much of the wedding industry is so hetero centered, and I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on with like Disney and Pixar recently.
Yeah.
But just with that too, that like life stories that are only highlighted or straight. So yeah, especially as like um yeah, if you do ever feel attraction to men, you're like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. And like I have blinders on and society has told me that all this can just fade into the background. It's like, no, no, no. All of those attractions
Mm,
are and love is valid.
yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Um, yeah, and there's so much going on right now when we're recording. I don't know what will be happening in the future, but um I saw this great post. His name's Matt, and but the handle is Matt IV, I think. So Matt 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they posted something that said it was like a picture of all these Disney characters kissing, and he was, or they were, I don't know their pronouns, but they were saying that we're not opposed to teaching our kids about sexuality because we highlight heterosexuality all the time. We're opposed to teaching our kids about anything but heterosexuality. I thought that was a really good visual example too.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in some ways it's like hopeful that like we've had like a cultural shift in like recognizing this shit to that
Yeah.
like the point where it feels odd. Like it feels like there's clearly a disconnect here to be like
Yeah.
that's not all that's out there. Like queer youth and like kids who are like 4 or 5 years old, like little lesbians, little bisexuals, like little trans kids, they need that stuff, and it's like
Yeah.
not sexualizing or weird to like give them the representation they deserve.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And so you're right. It, like just what I said, that it feels weird now that that's even a conversation we're having, but it wasn't a conversation we were having at all not that long ago. And so
Mm.
even though it feels tense and uncomfortable and also heartbreaking at times, it is a step in the right direction that we are even noticing the oddness of these systems. So I like that you reframed that and added some hope in there.
Yeah. And I mean, like, again, I don't know where the conversation will progress in a couple months, but the fact that, like, a bunch of, I think Disney and Pixar employees, like, band together to, like, write an open letter to the CEO, like, that
Yeah.
people are feeling empowered and that they will at least have, like, community support in being
Yeah.
like, we have these stories, we want to tell these stories. Like, I'm calling you out because there's got to be a shift, there's got to be a change.
Yeah. And what I love about you is that you really are helping to be a part of that change with the education that you're doing, but also the spaces that you're holding and creating for people. And I think sometimes this is something I unpack on my own, is like, I'm not doing enough to empower people or to support people, or maybe I'm not a good enough activist. But then and there's always room to grow. But then I think about the individual lives that I can change, or even if my following is kind of small, like that's still like if you put all those like 600 for me people in a room and talk to them, that would be a huge thing. So I feel like sometimes I can minimize the impact I'm having when it's actually like, even if you touch one person's life and change their mind and make them feel empowered and seen, you're doing a really amazing thing. And you're doing that with many more than just one person. So I really love that about you.
Won't make me cry. But like it's true though, at least like in my journey, like I can point to like singular people who like just by living their authentic lives and like being themselves was like a sense of permission or identifying moment for me. So yeah, just like yeah, being yourself in the world like does move the needle in terms of queer liberation.
Mm, just being yourself in the world. I love that. And that's such a brave, bold, beautiful thing to do.
Hmm. And I mean, I think like, yeah, also like being yourself, like there's no one way. Like you don't have to be like, ha, I'm gay. Like, yeah, because there's a million types of ways to like express queerness in your life, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Mm.
actually I shared this in last week's episode that when I first came out, I was like, well, this is who I am now, and everything in my life has to represent that. And that's okay. But then I had to like kind of navigate that and be like, okay, well, there's also other stuff about me. And do you find that either you did that or people that you work with, they like it's like all that's all it's about, and then it's like maybe it's not enough, like it's about finding a balance, I guess. Did you experience that at all?
Hmm. I think I think honestly, like had a have been working through probably in the past couple of years, like a lot of internalized homophobia and like judging myself and being like,
Mm,
you're so gay. Everything you do is gay. It's just gay all the time. And yeah,
yeah.
just giving myself permission to be like, I teach queer sex ed. Like I like witchcraft. I'm vegan. Like it's okay to be a gay stereotype and to have a lot of
Yeah.
the things that I love like be about my queerness. Yeah. So yeah, working on suppressing that like judgmental voice from myself.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And actually, in the Fuck Comphet Support Club, I wrote something about feeling like a bi stereotype and the thing was that I basically have crushes on everyone I meet ever. Um, and feeling like, oh, I'm like living up to such a stereotype. I feel embarrassed. And you actually responded and gave me such validation. So I really appreciate that. And it is okay for that to be ingrained in our personality and to show up in our interests. I think it's really beautiful that you're embracing such different interests, but you can see that common thread in them and that you're not a stereotype. It's okay to fill into some of those roles.
Hmm. Yeah, I told Sam basically about the crush thing. I was like, I have crushes on all of my friends. All my friends are really talented and they're very cool, and they also happen to be very pretty. And it's very lucky for me. Very lucky for me to have that.
I love so if our friends are listening, we have a
Yeah,
crush on you.
hello. You're great. Just know that we have a little tiny crush on you. That's nice.
I love it. We said it. Uh, can you tell me about the other space that you hold, which is the Fuck the Patriarchy, Fuck Yourself, which is so cool. I love that title so much.
Thanks. Yeah, so Fuck the Patriarchy, Fuck Yourself is my 14-week sexual wellness program. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And it's really about helping people bust sexual shame and find their authentic desires and foster a positive sexual relationship with themselves. Like really have a sense of like I can hold my different desires, I can move through them as they change, like compassion and curiosity and unlearning like a bunch of the cis hetero bullshit myths that we were taught growing up.
Yeah. Um, that's so beautiful. I have so much I want to ask you about. I think the first thing being like, it's overwhelming to realize how much you have ingrained and how much like programming isn't your own beliefs or desires. How how do you suggest or how do you guide folks through that kind of process when it feels so overwhelming and big?
Yeah, I mean, I think that working through a program like that is a really great way to do it because we have like workshops that we meet up with the group like
Mm,
every 2 weeks, and each module is on something different, and we start like really big, and it isn't until like the last couple modules where it's actually like, okay, we've cleared away all of that stuff, we've tackled like one myth at a time, and now like let's build up like the foundations of something that's more authentic and beautiful.
wow, that is so cool. And I'm sure it really helps to have that community aspect.
Yeah, totally. Like I think it's very powerful in itself, like when the purpose is to bust sexual shame, to like be in a
Mm,
community of people who are all on the same path as you and being like, I am committed to this, like I'm showing up to this and like seeing other people yeah, go on that journey and like be vulnerable and get affirmed and affirm each other, I think, yeah, in itself is really powerful.
Yeah, that is really powerful. And so cool that you're holding those spaces for people.
Thanks, Dana. It's
You're
also very
welcome.
fun. We have like sensual homework. So there's like with each module, there's like,
Ooh,
yeah, a chance to like make like a vision like mood board or like different like somatic exercises. So yeah, you like really awesome guest speakers. It's a lot of fun.
it is a lot of fun. I love that. Can you share maybe your favorite sensual homework that you've given?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess the one that comes to mind is like the mood or vision board. So we talk, one of the modules is about objectification and self objectification, and the ways that, like, for people who aren't cis men, like our sexuality is very much, we're kind of stripped of our humanity, and our sexuality is positioned as like something to serve other people and to be like looked at as opposed to like a living, breathing, whole, shifting, like dynamic ecosystem. So yeah, so the prompt is to like reimagine or like re-envision what like your sensual or sexual self and like vision could look like outside of the male gaze and outside of this very like limiting objectifying box. And yeah, the vision boards have been very like expansive and more kind of abstract and very cool. Yeah, so that's been awesome.
Wow, that is so cool. And I would really love to try that. I think growing up as someone who felt objectified a lot, it that seems like very empowering and also like really would rewrite a lot of those narratives that I have that like my body is just for others, especially cis men to look at and to consume. It seems very empowering to not only like know that on an intellectual level, but actually do activities that reinforce that. I think that's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yay! I highly recommend.
Yeah. When does your program open for the next round?
We are starting enrollment April 27th. So it might be just past when the podcast comes out. Um, yeah, yeah, we start like open doors kind of the end of May, but start enrollment at the end of April. Yeah, but there is, you can, folks at any time can always join. I have like a wait list. Um, if you go to subscribepage.com/FPFY waitlist, or if you go to my website, you can always join the waitlist and then you'll know when the next cohort is coming around.
Oh, perfect. And the link to join the waiting list is in the bio or the show notes as well.
Yay! Good sound.
Yay. Awesome. You're welcome. So yeah, I would love to know anything you want to share about your coming out journey and what that looked like for you.
Yeah. My coming out journey has been a fun time. I I did a lot of gay stuff for a very long time, and for some reason was like, what? Me? Gay? No. I like founded my high school's gay straight alliance. I like had sex with women. Oh, just stuff that you do when you're not gay. But it took for me like had realizing I had romantic feelings for this girl to be like, okay, this is undeniable.
Yeah.
So I initially came out as bi in 2018, and then came out again as a lesbian and as non-binary in November 2021.
Oh, that's pretty recent. Congratulations.
Thanks. I know, I forget that. Pretty new to the club.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I always love hearing people say like the things that they did in high school or growing up that in retrospect is like, oh yeah. How did I not see that?
Yeah, yeah, literally. I'm like, yeah, sometimes I'm like, nobody in the GSA, nobody was like, let's pull Eva over. Let's just do a little check-in. I'm like, no, that's good. It's good for them to not have probed me for questions. But you could have asked once. I wouldn't have been mad just once.
I know. I used to say things like, I wish I could be a lesbian.
Right? Yes.
It's like, yeah, and I thought I was straight.
You heard it here first. Straight women do not wish they were lesbians. Straight women aren't like, at some point in my life, I'll probably fuck a woman. That's something I want to do at some point.
Yeah, that's a
No.
pretty good clue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Awesome. What was your process like of like deciding that you wanted to come out from bisexual to lesbian and then like actually making that like coming out?
Yeah. Hmm. I think part of it for me, well, like, okay, since I came out as bisexual, I did not really date any men. I did not really go on any dating apps and swipe for men.
Mhm.
Wasn't out here. So for a long time since I came out, I was like, well, I'm like bi, but I'm like pretty gay. And then it got to a point where I don't know. I was dating somebody, and they are like non-binary, and they're like, if I was a man, like you'd still be into me, right? And I was like, into. I was like, interesting. And they were also bi, and so like they would share their experience, and I'd be like, like how I feel about that. And I just started trying out like the label lesbian and like with other lesbian friends that I have, and it like would feel really affirming. And the
Yeah.
more I used it and like talked to other lesbians and was like, the idea of never dating a man again, I could fuck with that. And it's kind of been like that forever, like since then. And I'm like, we'll see. If I ever feel different, then I will change it up.
Mm.
But feels great right now.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Um, yeah, that's actually interesting about labels. I was just having a chat about someone and we were talking about like labels feel so good when the only label you've had is like maybe straight, for example. Like it feels really good to label yourself as something else. And then there's also a point where a label can feel restrictive. And so
Mhm.
I love that you said that that's the label that feels good right now and it feels really affirming. And then like who knows how that label is going to evolve. You're not attached to the label itself so much as you are your authentic truth. So I really like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm also like currently like exploring like using like a T for T label, which is like describes like trans people who date other trans people. Because
Hmm.
like my dating history is like very much dating other non-binary people. And like
Yeah.
currently, like the people who I'm attracted to are like very also non-binary.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're all just, especially yeah, being non-binary and like it is kind of like an expansive or creative use of the word lesbian. I'm like, we're figuring it out, creating the words that work.
Mm, I love that. And that's just such a good lesson for us to remember that we can ebb and flow and we can try things on and we can change our minds and find new labels and just kind of ride that flow of desire.
Mhm. Yeah.
I love it. And speaking of desire, something that I know that you do is work with people about finding our authentic desires.
Mhm.
And I'd love to maybe start on that topic with like why is that so hard to find our authentic or to know our authentic desires?
Yeah. I mean, I think it can be so hard because literally all the systems do not want us to tap into our authentic desires. Like capitalism, if we were truly able to like set boundaries and like know on a gut level like what felt good and what didn't and like how to maintain our well-being, well, where would all the jobs that demand people experience burnout? What about all the products that they're trying to sell us because we feel inferior or we want like a quick hit of dopamine because we're so fucking tired from our like jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also like as like people who aren't cis men, as like queer and trans people, like I think having access to pleasure as like a resource in terms of fueling revolutionary movements, and also yeah, creating a life that like is outside of the cis heteropatriarchy is very very powerful and something that the systems do not want.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. How do you, so that being said, how do you like kind of get back to those authentic desires and how do you even know what you want?
Yeah, I mean, I think like starting to understand like where the myth or the shoulds stop and where what you actually like starts, and like holding compassion around figuring that out. And I think also, at least for me, like being in community and like being in relationships, friendships that really encourage you to do what feels really good and like really honors like
Mhm.
knows, and like truly cares about you feeling good in the stuff that you're doing can help rewrite some of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that is so beautiful. And you said something, hold on, this is one of those moments I'm gonna have to pause it. You used a phrase I really loved. What was it? Authentic desires, shame, community.
Yeah, but like honoring the nose and
Oh,
like
it was about pleasure. Okay.
mhm,
Bloop, 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 bloop.
mhm,
You mentioned pleasure and finding our pleasure and how that can be empowering. Um, what does the word pleasure mean to you? I think when I first heard pleasure, I was like, ah, no. And I'm like just now beginning to like kind of soften and accept that word. So yeah, I'm
mhm.
curious what pleasure means to you.
I love that. Yeah, I think part of the work that like I do in the program is also about shifting our scripts around pleasure. Um, I have like we do like a weekly invitation to turn towards pleasure, which I'm like, yeah, we need the full 14 weeks to practice. And the first three are probably going to be like, am I allowed to just like, a lot of it is like sensory and like sensual pleasure. I'm like, am I allowed to, some of the stuff like feels kind of cliche, but I don't know, for me, like some of my favorite sensory pleasures are like bodies of water. I'm like, I'm allowed to make it a priority to like want to just like go to the Lake Ontario and like breathe it in, or like I really like
Yeah.
dancing. So yeah, like five senses pleasure. I think also for people who aren't men, like food and pleasure can be like a challenging spot, but that
Mhm.
can also be a big source of pleasure. Um, yeah, and then of course like sensual, and erotic pleasure too.
So cool. You reminded me when you said this is cliche. I also feel that way about taking baths, and I feel like there was a big thing of like baths are not the only way to practice self-care. But I'm like, but they're also like really good, and that's also taking like an hour or so just for yourself without doing any work, without or maybe you're with someone, but I'm thinking of my solo baths
Mm-hmm.
of just being completely alone with yourself and hey, if that's not self-care, I don't know what is. So I like the cliche ones too. I think they're just as valuable as maybe the more like creative ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you could like it's a cliche for a reason. Like people list these things because yeah, some of them are very nice. It's true. Like a bath is like an immersive. You can have like candles and like you can activate lots of your senses. Very cool. Very good.
Yeah, I like that you included that some pleasure either could involve all of your senses or you can focus on senses like taste or touch or smell and like kind of single them out. I think that's a really fun way to play with pleasure.
Hmm.
I like that. And I feel like it's nice to know that you can have pleasure if you're single for it. Like I always thought that pleasure had to be sex with someone else, but you can have solo pleasure sexually, or you can have solo pleasure like by taking a bath or eating some chocolate or whatever that looks like for you. Like pleasure is still accessible for you even if you're not in a partnership.
Yeah, and that was I was thinking too as we were talking about like how do you find authentic pleasure and that stuff. Or yeah, how do you find authentic pleasure? And for me, like talking about solo intimacy and solo sex has been, and teaching about it, I feel like is one of a huge resource. Because yeah, in those spaces, like you don't have there you can still have expectations of yourself to unlearn, but you're not also managing somebody else's expectations. And I think that, yeah, it can be, there can be like a space of permission, a space of exploration um, that can, yeah, be really transformative there too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love that you're teaching about that and talking about it and normalizing it. There's so much shame around self pleasure in a
Mm-hmm.
sexual sense or a sensual sense when it's actually a great way to get to know our bodies, get to know ourselves, and also like just good for you, like hormonally. It releases some
Yeah.
good shit.
Yes. Yeah, I mean it's interesting because yeah, like the majority of the time that I've been a sex educator, I
Yeah.
have been some kind of single. So when people are like, "Wow, that's so interesting. You like focus on solo sex." I'm like, "Yeah, bud. Like this is the foundation of my work." Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Um, so in your work as a queer sex educator, what other things do you focus on?
Ooh. Um, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is okay, let me think about this. I think my work in general is around like helping people release some of the cis hetero expectations from sex. And in that way, I think that queer sex ed can benefit everybody. But yeah, there are some like insidious ways that queer people, those myths like get into our brain kind of uniquely. So I try and tackle those. Like the idea, I had a post about how no matter what your kind of gender expression is, like you can take on whatever roles or not, or have fluidity in the bedroom. Because, yeah, that's one where, like, oh, even within queer relationships, there's expectation that, like, the masculine partner will maybe be more dominant or, like, be more of a giver of pleasure. When it's like, I don't know, that's, we can, that's not a rule. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you for saying that. What other like things that you may have noticed that really resonate with folks when you're teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I think another big one that's obviously for everybody, but also for queer people is like experience of sexual shame can be unique.
Mm,
Yeah, folks like learning that their desire is maybe like predatory, or like how to navigate a queer desire when like they have been the recipient of like non-consensual attraction or stuff. And they're like, how do I hit on people? How do I reach out to people in a way that is really like good and consensual and fun? And yeah, growing up like not having any representation of like queer love or queer attraction in a way that's like not super sexualized. It can be, people can internalize like, oh, this attraction that I have that maybe I can only see in porn or like in like
Yeah.
17 whatever rated like movies, like it's not in any Disney movies, does that mean that it's like
Mm,
dirty or like deviant or like more salacious than like heterosexual desire? So
mm.
yeah, working with people around like that additional layer of shame.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm thinking about that in relation to like maybe not so much spirituality, but also religion. And people who listen to this are usually kind of spiritual leaning. Um, there's so much to unpack there. And that's what we talked about last week too, with Ash about the ways that religion kind of seeps in and we think that we're sinful or bad. Um, and that also like seeks its way into just spirituality, I think, too, because
Mm-hmm.
we were like indoctrinated in that way. I don't know where I was going with this, but
Yeah.
just like I think that's really prevalent as well, not just in the society, but like in religions. Oh, and I remember there was this one phrase that I always heard in my hometown, which was love, love the sinner, hate the sin.
Yeah.
And it's just so hurtful to think of
Mm-hmm.
someone's authentic truth and desire and like love for another as sinful. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big thing to unpack as well.
Totally. And like, yeah. Yeah, I just have so much love for like queer and trans people who like grew up like specifically receiving those messages. And also they like ripple out like into like what policies get made and like larger culture too. Yeah, and I would highly recommend if people like resonate with this, Erica Smith Sex Ed on Instagram. Um, this is her whole work, and she runs like a program called around for like purity culture dropouts. So
Mm,
yeah, I have not personally experienced this, so I'm always like, there's support, there are people doing this stuff.
yeah. Okay. I'll link Erica's Instagram in the show notes as well.
Cool.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Um, hmm. Oh, I wanted to touch on your Master's of Science. You got your Master's in exploring sexuality and sexting. I think that is
Mhm.
so cool. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was in academia for a long time. I was like, I'm gonna do my PhD. I'm gonna become a prof. I did not get
Wow.
accepted. Yeah, I didn't get accepted into my PhD, which I'm on. I'm like deeply thankful for that one prof for being like, I think you got some other stuff going on. I think that that's probably a better
Oh,
vibe for you.
yeah.
But yeah, I did do my master's. And yeah, I was looking at young women like 18 to 29's experience of sexting and really about how sexting can be related to sexual communication, about desires and like sexual health and pleasure. Yeah.
That is so cool. Um, I've never heard of that being a study that people do. What did you find in that study that you did?
Hmm. Yeah, oh my gosh. I found out that like sex research was a thing in like my undergrad, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what? There are people who've dedicated their lives to giving people surveys about their masturbation habits? These are my people. This is where I've always belonged.
Yes. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of my work is like around like translating that because I'm like, there are tomes of knowledge that just like nobody knows about. So might as well freaking share it with the people. Um, but yeah, I what did I find? I found that people who sexted more frequently also talked more about their desires and like disclosed SDI status, talked about SDI testing, and people who sexted quite frequently reported higher sexual satisfaction and their like score of pleasure at their latest sexual encounter was higher than people who were not sexters. So yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting. And so you're saying there's a correlation there between communication and sexting, that these people are probably better communicators about their desires and also other things that are important to know. And I know it's hard to talk about sex. Like literally in my health class, we didn't talk about that. Like we were allowed to sign a form that said you could decide to not learn about sex and not have to talk about sex. Like, so of course we feel uncomfortable talking about it. It feels embarrassing or scary. What are some helpful tips you have for like initiating those conversations when it feels kind of scary?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that is totally, yeah. And when you have all the movies where people just like bend at the knees and the lights dim, and you're like, oh, okay, we just all know magically what each other likes, and this is all, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's not in our scripts at all. But yeah, so I mean, probably unsurprisingly, I'm a fan of like, if talking about it over text is less scary than like doing it in person, like heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to one of the like questions I used to ask in terms of like talking to potential partners is I would ask like, what is your most oh my gosh, what let me think about this. Oh, what sex act do you think is underrated? What sex act do you think is overrated? And what sex act do you think is correctly rated? Um, yeah, and for me that felt like kind of an easier way than just being like, what are you into? Which like that's awesome. But if you're working up towards it, that feel like puts a little bit of distance. You're just like considering, let's talk about it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of like there are different I don't know if you've heard of the idea of like a want will want list.
No, what
Like
is
a
that?
yes no maybe list. Yeah.
Oh, can you explain that?
It is pretty much what it says, but you write down like all the things that you're like, yes, I want to do that. Things that you're like, maybe like are under certain conditions or like if my partner was really into that, and then like all the things that you don't want to do. And you can either like write those lists kind of with your partner as like a bonding activity, like cute little date night moment. Or you can
Oh,
like write them separately and like shoot it over in a text. But yeah, just like that there's no shame in like if writing it down to yourself is a thing. Then that's yeah, there are also a bunch of really cool like templates with a bunch of like suggestions of ways you can fill up the yes no maybe list. There's one
cool.
on Scarletine I really like, and Beck's Talk Sex also has one that I really like. Yeah, I don't know, also like I think going into those conversations with like centering curiosity and like a lack of expectations, and like a lot of care and like enthusiasm goes a long way because yeah, other people around us likely have a lot of the same like, what if they judge me, what if they expect me to do the thing that I want to do right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, like setting that tone to be like, this will be one of many conversations. Like let's just get curious about it. Let's see. Like let's chat. I feel like can go
Yeah.
a long way.
Yeah. And those prompts are very fun to me. Like that just seems like a kind of a fun, lighthearted way to approach topics that can feel kind of scary. Because you're
Mhm.
right. It is basically asking like, what are you into? What are you not into? But those questions are like big and vague and like feel serious. But like, yeah, what do you think's over underrated or correctly rated? It's fun and you're bringing that kind of playfulness to it, which I think is really important to start thinking about our sexuality and our sensuality with like a sense of curiosity, like you said, or playfulness and inquisitiveness.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. These are some of my favorite things to talk about. So this is awesome.
It's so wonderful. And you have like a very fun spirit or energy to you, and it makes having this conversation fun. So I hope that can inspire people too, that it doesn't always have to be I mean, serious is okay, but it doesn't have to be like a heavy conversation or like an unpleasant conversation. It can be just as fun as talking about other fun stuff is.
Yes, I also love in terms of fun and stuff. There's a video that I also recommend or like for the like want will won't list or yes no maybe list.
Hmm.
The Sexplanations YouTube channel has a video on 500 sex acts, I think. Um,
Wow.
so if you're like, I don't know what I would fill up my yes no maybe list with, I got
Yeah.
like 5 things that I put in the columns. Watching that video, you're like, whoa, like, wow. You're like, okay, like spooning can go on the list. And also see, like, oh, like there's a lot of things out there. Maybe I don't want to do most of the 500. But yeah, it's very fun to like have that all it like presented in a very fun, expansive way.
Yeah. I'll link that below and maybe that would be like a cool date night, like you were saying, to kind of watch those together and react together. That sounds kind of fun.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. When I'm wondering about like having to say no or like, oh, I don't really like that. What are ways that people can feel comfortable saying that?
That's a really good question. Hmm. I mean, I think like when it comes to like making a request or like reaching out to connect around sexuality, like that's what it's about. It's about like connection and care and like a request for yeah, play. And I think there's a way that you can say no like while still keeping that like spirit uh like intact.
Mhm.
Like there like you can absolutely say like I'm so stoked that you're into that. And either like I encourage you to explore that in your like solo intimacy time, and whether or not you're like interested in like hearing about it, that is up to you, like your own boundaries. Um, Maybe suggesting another way of meeting some of those like care, connection, play, erotic needs. Um, yeah, yeah, suggesting like, is there a way that you could like meet in the middle in some way that both that feels enthusiastically great for all parties?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. I hope that makes sense. I'm like thinking as I'm like saying it.
Yes, that does make sense. And I really appreciate that because I feel like saying our desires is hard, but then also like communicating like that we want something different can also be challenging as well. So I really appreciate those tips.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like, um, there's a practice that Marley has introduced me to. We both know Marley, who runs the co-creator of the Comphet Support Club. Um, just the idea of like in your relationship, like having a practice where somebody says no, you say thank you. Um, can be yeah, really transformative to have someone be like it feels I'm like I am genuinely being authentic when I'm like, thank you. Like I know how fucking hard it is to say no. And like I'm
Yeah.
so glad that like we are only gonna do stuff that's gonna feel so good for you. Like that is like so exciting and
Yeah.
because you know that like that also makes that relationship like stronger and like yeah, I don't know. It so the no is also a path to like greater authentic connection and for like even more positive experiences.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really cool way to look at it. And you can use that in your regular life too. Like if someone says, no, I can't meet, like I don't feel up to meeting you for lunch today, instead of being like, oh, it's okay. You could say, oh, thank you. Thanks for honoring your energy. I think it's a really cool way to switch that. And I really like that too.
Yeah, because like yeah, like if your friend had like pushed past their no to like meet you for coffee, like maybe like I don't know, they would be tired and like not as present, or they would feel some feelings of like resentment. Versus like if they were like, let's plan a time when like, I don't know, like I can come to your house, like we can watch a movie that's a little bit more chill, and then that's gonna be a way better time.
Yeah, I love that. It's really helped me a lot to think of consent as not just in the sexual space. Like I can give you consent to go over and watch a movie, but then I could also take that consent back, or I could change my consent and say like, can we just watch a show instead? Like consent is really important for every aspect of our lives, and that's been really life-changing for me, I think.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's something that I feel like I'm learning too. And yeah, like Marley has taught me a lot about that because that is her huge part of her domain of work. But I think like as a sex educator, people maybe don't think that like they're like, oh, you're talking about the stuff that like happens in 20 minutes, like on the bed. But I'm like, no, no, like how to set boundaries, consent, how to feel into pleasure. Like that shit is like paradigm shifting across like in your work, in your friendships, like in all areas of your life.
Yeah. And then you could also go from those in to maybe like help give you that comfort. Like you don't always have to
Mhm.
practice it in on the bed in 20 minutes. You could practice it at work. And I feel like that confidence would also seep into your on the bed time.
100%, 100%.
That's so
Um,
cool.
mhm.
Cool. I actually had one more question for you before we close, which is like, how do you suggest people put themselves out there when they're just starting to date in the queer space, or like that's not something they've been super comfortable with before?
Ooh, good question. Hmm.
Just put you on the
I
spot too.
No, no worries. I'm like not at all relevant to what is happening currently in my life. Work, the personal for me, there we overlap in swearing. But yeah, one thing I'd say is like get yourself in queer spaces in general. Like
Yeah.
get like just maybe not like the goal of like I want to meet a girlfriend, which I can understand. But that can sometimes feel like a lot of pressure or like scary. But just the goal of like I want to meet more queer people, or like I want to have more conversations with queer people. Like that is a stepping stone of like decreasing some of that anxiety, and also um making connections, and like you never know like who you're going to meet, and like yeah, putting yourself like in environments with other queer people who share the same value, share the same interests as you. Yeah, and I don't know, like I think at least for me, queer dating, like people are pretty nice to each other. So like it's starting to like whether you're on like apps or like I really like Lex, which is kind of like a personal ad based like dating app where you like
Hmm,
write a little profile and then you can write like a specific ad, be like, I am looking for this specific thing. And people
cool.
kind of engage, or you can respond to other people's ads.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like especially now over the pandemic, like so many people have come out, so many people have like stepped into new levels of their queerness, like you are not alone. And honestly, I think that at least my experience, like the gays are excited, the gays are ready to go, they're ready to meet, they're ready to like have these conversations, I think. And I would hope that like the world's pretty welcoming for you to like bash around, maybe have some mistakes. It's part of learning how to do something new. But
Yeah.
that they're also going to be really wonderful people.
Aw, I really like that. And I like the advice of being in queer spaces because then you're also going to hear your friends talk about going on dates, and it's going to feel less like this really scary big thing, and like more normalized maybe.
Totally.
Oh, I like that. Thank you. And thanks for letting me put you on the spot.
Of course. I'm like, great. That's now going to turn into a post. Thank you very much, Sam.
You are welcome. Awesome. Well, actually, first, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you would like to make sure you say?
um, I don't. Oh, I was gonna be like, our next Fuck Comphet Support Club call, but no, this is in the future. We are gonna have a Fuck Comphet Support Club monthly call in June. Maybe it'll be in person, depending on how the you Sam's hearing this first.
Yes.
Yeah, depending on how COVID goes. I know Marley and I are both like, get the peeps together as soon as we can. So yeah, especially for like Pride, we would love to do something in person. So yeah, eh, check out my Instagram at What's My Body Doing. Join the Fuck on Bed Support Club to find out about that.
Yes, and the support club is so worth it. It's only $10 a month right now, anyways. And the community online is so supportive and so engaging, and the calls are so affirming and so fun. It doesn't feel like I go to a lot of Zoom calls. It doesn't feel like a chore. It feels genuinely exciting and like a party, and everyone's like automatically like it feels like meeting new friends. It doesn't feel like an awkward Zoom call. You both do a really good job at that.
Aw, that makes me so happy to hear.
Yay. So speaking of, actually, I'll ask you for this first. Can you send our listeners home with a resource or a challenge to focus on in the next week?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I gave so many different little like, yeah, I would say, um, hmm, okay. I'm trying, I'm trying to, yeah, I would invite you to have like a solo sensory sensual like exploration session. That can be like totally not erotic or like it can be erotic. But yeah, just like lead with curiosity, lead with self-compassion. Um, you could put it in a yes, put what you learned in like a yes, no, maybe less after, do a little bit of journaling. But yeah, just like see what you find. Try different like textures, different places of like touching maybe. Yeah.
Sorry. I like that a lot. I like the idea of making that list for yourself too. That's really cool.
Hmm.
And finally, you already kind of mentioned your handle, but can you say it one more time?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at What's My Body Doing. So that's I spell it out. WH. Nope, I know it's gonna be too much. What's my body doing? Also, if you look up Eva Bloom Instagram, I should come up there.
And you're doing so many awesome things. So make sure you listening go to Eva's page and check out all the cool things that they are doing because there's a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, and also if you would like to join the waitlist for my program, Fuck the Patriarchy, Fuck Yourself, if you join the waitlist, you get access to a free 20-minute sexting training from someone who did their master's in sexting. So, like, I know some stuff.
A sexting sexpert.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, yeah. So if you go to my website, evabloom.ca/FPFY program and click join the waitlist, yeah, you'll get that training. And it's like no obligation to join the program, totally free. But yeah, some cool sexting tips.
Yeah, I am absolutely going to do that. That sounds so awesome and such a great resource. Thank you.
Yay, of course.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was such a treat.
Yeah, it really was such a great conversation.